The coffee shop on 5th Street had exactly three things going for it: decent Wi-Fi, terrible lighting, and the ability to make Sophia Reeves completely invisible, which was exactly what she needed at 6:23 a.m. on a Tuesday, hunched over her laptop, with paint still embedded under her fingernails and yesterday's mascara smudged beneath her eyes. She'd been coming here every morning for 6 months, ever since she'd been evicted from her shared studio space downtown. The rent had tripled overnight when the building was sold to developers, scattering 24 struggling artists to the wind like dandelion seeds. Now Sophia worked from her cramped studio apartment, but she came to Romano's Coffee to maintain some semblance of professional routine. "One large coffee, black, no sugar," she muttered to herself, typing furiously on her laptop. She was responding to another gallery rejection, the 14th this month. Each email was a variation of the same theme. "Your work shows promise, but it's not quite what we're looking for at this time." What they meant was that her paintings were too raw, too honest, too much like actual human emotion, splattered across canvas, instead of the sterile, market-friendly pieces that sold to collectors who viewed art as investment portfolios. The bell above the door chimed, and Sophia glanced up out of habit. A man in an expensive suit was arguing with someone on his phone, his voice low, but clearly agitated. He was the kind of person who didn't belong in Romano's Too Polished, too important, too much like the gallery owners who dismissed her work with polite smiles and form rejection letters. "No, Marcus, I specifically said the Rothstein piece was not for sale," the man said, running his free hand through dark hair that probably cost more to maintain than Sophia's monthly rent. "I don't care what the client is offering." He ended the call with more force than necessary and approached the counter, where Giuseppe Romano, the 70-year-old Italian owner who treated his coffee shop like a sacred trust, was wiping down the espresso machine with religious devotion. "Double espresso," the man said curtly. "To go." Giuseppe didn't even look up. "We don't do to go." "Excuse me? You want to go coffee? There's a Starbucks 3 blocks down. Here, you sit, you drink, you appreciate." Giuseppe's English was accented, but his tone was unmistakable. This wasn't a negotiation. The man checked his expensive watch. "I don't have time to sit. I have a meeting." "Everyone has meetings," Giuseppe interrupted. "Nobody has time to taste their coffee anymore. This is the problem with the world." Sophia bit back a smile, watching the standoff between old-world philosophy and modern impatience. The suited man looked like he was calculating whether it was worth arguing with a septuagenarian over coffee protocol. "Fine," he said finally, with the air of someone making a significant concession. "I'll sit for 5 minutes." Giuseppe beamed and began preparing the espresso with the focus of a conductor leading a symphony. The man chose a table near the window, coincidentally, right next to Sophia's corner spot. She tried to ignore him, but his presence was distracting. He kept checking his phone, tapping his fingers against the table, radiating the kind of restless energy that made her want to either paint him or flee. "Interesting color choice," he said suddenly. Sophia looked up confused. "What?" He nodded toward her laptop screen, where she had a photo of her latest painting, open a swirling mass of blues and grays that she'd titled "Drowning in Daylight." "The contrast between the cerulean and the charcoal," he continued. "It's unsettling but compelling, like emotional weather." Sophia stared at him. "You know about color theory." "I know about art." His voice was softer now, more thoughtful. "That piece, it's yours." "Yes." She closed the laptop protectively. "Not that it matters. Apparently it's too emotionally volatile for contemporary tastes." The man's expression sharpened. "Which gallery told you that?" "Meridian Arts, among others." Sophia didn't know why she was talking to him. Something about his genuine interest in her work had caught her off guard. "Meridian Arts." He repeated the name with distaste. "Helen Carrington?" "You know her?" "Unfortunately," the man extended his hand. "Ethan Cross." Sophia shook it automatically, noting the calluses on his fingers that seemed at odds with his corporate appearance. Sophia Reeves. "Nice to meet you, Sophia Reeves." Ethan's smile transformed his entire face from stern businessman to something approaching human. And for what it's worth, Helen Carrington wouldn't recognize authentic emotion if it painted itself on her wall. She's more interested in what sells to hedge fund managers than what actually matters. Speaking from experience? Speaking from painful experience. Ethan glanced at his watch again. I have to go, but he hesitated as if debating something internal. Would you be interested in showing your work somewhere that might actually appreciate it? Sophia's heart jumped, but she kept her voice steady. Where? I own a gallery downtown, Cross Contemporary. We specialize in emerging artists who have something to say. Cross Contemporary. Sophia knew the name. It was one of the most respected galleries in the city, known for launching careers and championing artists who pushed boundaries. She'd never even bothered submitting her work there, assuming it was far out of her league. You own Cross Contemporary, she said slowly. I do, and I'd like to see more of your work. Ethan pulled out a business card, thick, expensive paper with elegant typography. Send me a portfolio, 20 pieces, digital format. Include the story behind each one. He stood to leave, then paused. And Sophia, don't change your style to please Helen Carrington or anyone like her. The world has enough safe art. What it needs is truth. He was gone before Sophia could respond, leaving her staring at his business card like it might disappear if she blinked. Sophia spent the next 3 days curating her portfolio with the obsessive attention of a surgeon. 20 pieces that represented 7 years of work, of growth, of bleeding her soul onto canvas and hoping someone would understand. There was Midnight in Mother's Kitchen, a dark, swirling piece she'd painted after her mother's funeral when grief felt like drowning in black water. Sunday Morning Loneliness, painted in her first apartment after college, all pale yellows and empty spaces. The Weight of Waiting, created during the 6 months she'd spent caring for her father through chemotherapy, heavy with ominous purples and anxious greys. Each painting came with a story, just as Ethan had requested. Sophia found herself writing more than she'd ever written about her work, explaining not just the technical choices, but the emotional archaeology behind each piece. The email sat in her drafts folder for 2 hours before she finally hit send. The response came faster than she'd expected. Within an hour, her phone rang with an unknown number. Sophia, it's Ethan Cross. I've been looking at your portfolio. Her heart hammered. And I'd like to offer you a solo show. Sophia nearly dropped the phone. I'm sorry, what? A solo exhibition. 8 weeks from now, we have an opening in our schedule. I'm thinking 12 to 15 pieces, with Drowning in Daylight as the centerpiece. Ethan's voice was professional but warm. That is, if you're interested. Interested? Are you insane? Of course I'm interested. Sophia was pacing her tiny apartment, too excited to sit still. But are you sure? I mean, my work is pretty intense. Intense is exactly what we need. Can you come in tomorrow morning, say 10 o'clock? We can discuss details, look at the space, talk about pricing and promotion. Pricing, as in people would pay money for her paintings. Sophia had sold exactly 3 pieces in her entire career, all to friends who probably bought them out of pity. I'll be there, she managed. Good. And Sophia, bring Midnight in Mother's Kitchen. I have a feeling about that one. Cross Contemporary occupied the ground floor of a converted warehouse in the Arts District, all exposed brick and soaring ceilings with natural light pouring through massive windows. It was exactly the kind of space Sophia had dreamed of showing, in serious but not pretentious, elegant but not cold. Ethan met her at the front door, looking more relaxed than he had in the coffee shop. He'd traded his suit for dark jeans and a button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal those surprising calluses she'd noticed before. Welcome to my second home, he said, leading her through the main gallery space. The current exhibition featured large-scale abstract pieces that played with light and shadow in ways that made Sophia's breath catch. This is incredible, she said, stopping in front of a piece that seemed to shift and breathe as she looked at it. Marcus Delacroix. This is his 3rd show with us. We've watched him evolve from tentative experiments to this complete mastery of his medium. Ethan's voice carried genuine pride. That's what I love about this business, being part of an artist's journey. They continued through the space, Ethan explaining the layout, the lighting systems, the way different walls affected how pieces were perceived. Sophia tried to imagine her work here, her emotional storms hanging alongside established artists, being seen by people who understood art as more than decoration. The back wall would be perfect for Drowning in Daylight, Ethan said, stopping in front of a large white expanse. It's our focal wall, the first thing people see when they enter the main space. Sophia could picture it, her churning blues and greys commanding attention, demanding to be felt rather than simply observed. "Can I ask you something?" she said as they settled in Ethan's office, a glass-walled space overlooking the gallery floor. "Of course." "Why me? You could show anyone. Established artists, people with actual sales records, people who won't scare away your collectors." Ethan leaned back in his chair, considering the question. "Do you know why I got into the gallery business?" "I assumed you inherited it or something." "No, I built it from nothing. 10 years ago, I was a corporate lawyer, mergers and acquisitions, 100-hour weeks, 7-figure salary. I was miserable but successful, which everyone told me was the same thing." Sophia studied his face, trying to reconcile the passionate gallery owner with the image of a corporate lawyer. "What changed?" "I bought a painting, impulse purchase from a street artist in Soho. It was rough, unfinished, probably worth about $50. But it was the first thing I'd seen in years that made me feel something real." Ethan smiled at the memory. "I hung it in my office, and every time I looked at it, I remembered that beauty existed outside of billable hours and profit margins." "So you quit law to open a gallery?" "So, I quit law to remember what it felt like to be human. The gallery came later." Ethan leaned forward. "Your work does the same thing that painting did for me. It cuts through all the noise and pretense and just hits you in the chest. That's rare, Sophia, that's valuable." "Even if it doesn't sell?" "Art that matters always finds its audience. It might take time, but authentic work endures." Ethan pulled out a folder. "That said, I think you'll be surprised. There are more people hungry for real emotion than you might think." They spent the next 2 hours going over details. Pricing, higher than Sophia had ever dared imagine. Promotion. Ethan's marketing team was already drafting press releases, and timeline, 6 weeks to prepare additional pieces if she wanted to expand the show. "One more thing," Ethan said as they wrapped up. "Opening night, it's important, critics, collectors, other artists. I know it can be overwhelming, but—" "I'll be there," Sophia interrupted. "Terrified, but there." "Good. And Sophia?" Ethan stood, extending his hand again. "This is going to be the beginning of something important. I can feel it." As Sophia walked home through the city streets, Ethan's business card in her pocket and a signed contract in her bag, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. The 6 weeks leading up to the exhibition passed in a blur of creative intensity, unlike anything Sophia had ever experienced. She painted with a focus that bordered on obsession, driven by the knowledge that this might be her only chance to prove that her work mattered. Ethan checked in regularly, sometimes with practical questions about framing and titles, sometimes just to see how she was handling the pressure. Their conversations gradually shifted from purely professional to something more personal. She learned that he'd grown up in Chicago, the son of 2 accountants who still didn't understand why he'd abandoned a lucrative legal career to play with pictures. He discovered that she'd been painting seriously since she was 12, when art became her escape from a house filled with her parents' failing marriage and her own sense of not quite fitting anywhere. "Art saved me," she told him during one of their coffee meetings at Romano's, which had become their unofficial headquarters. "When everything else felt chaotic or fake, I could paint something true." "Is that what you're doing now, painting truth?" Sophia considered the question while Giuseppe bustled around them, still refusing to serve anyone to-go coffee and still lecturing customers about the importance of slowing down. "I'm trying to, but I'm also terrified that my truth isn't interesting enough for other people." "Your truth is the only thing that's interesting," Ethan said firmly. "The world is full of people painting what they think other people want to see. You paint what you need to say." As opening night approached, Sophia found herself looking forward to their meetings for reasons that had nothing to do with the exhibition. Ethan was unlike anyone she'd ever known, successful without being arrogant, passionate about art without being pretentious, interested in her thoughts on everything from color theory to coffee shop politics. "Are you nervous?" he asked 3 days before the opening, as they stood in the gallery space reviewing the final layout. "Petrified," Sophia admitted. "What if no one comes? What if they come but hate everything? What if—" What if it's exactly what it's supposed to be? Ethan interrupted gently. What if you stop trying to control the outcome and just trust the work? Sophia looked around the gallery, seeing her paintings hung with museum-quality lighting and professional labels. Drowning in daylight dominated the back wall, just as Ethan had envisioned, its blues and greys swirling with an intensity that made her chest tight with recognition. "It's strange," she said, "seeing my work here in this context. It's like watching your private thoughts become public." That's exactly what it is, and that's exactly why it matters. The night before the opening, Sophia couldn't sleep. She walked through her apartment, looking at the paintings she'd chosen not to include, thinking about the stories behind each one. At 2 a.m., her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Can't sleep either, want some company." She found him waiting outside her building with 2 cups of coffee from the 24-hour diner down the street. "Giuseppe would be horrified by this coffee," she said, accepting the cup gratefully. "Giuseppe would be horrified by most things about modern life," Ethan replied, "but sometimes you need bad coffee at 2 a.m. They walked through the empty streets, talking about everything except the exhibition. Ethan told her about his early days, struggling to establish the gallery, about the first artist who'd trusted him with a solo show, about the moment he'd realized he'd found his calling. "What about you?" he asked as they ended up in a small park, sitting on a bench under a streetlight. "What's next, after tomorrow?" "I don't know," Sophia admitted. "For so long, getting a solo show has been the goal. I haven't thought past it." "Maybe that's okay. Maybe the goal was never the show itself. Maybe it was becoming the person who could handle a solo show." Sophia looked at him, really looked at him, and felt something shift between them. The careful professional distance they'd maintained was dissolving, replaced by something more honest and more dangerous. "Ethan," she said softly. "I know." His voice was equally quiet. "This is complicated. Because you're my gallerist. Because I'm falling in love with you, and I don't want to mess this up for either of us." The words hung in the air between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. "What do we do?" Sophia asked. "We get through tomorrow. We make your opening night everything it should be, and then—" Ethan reached for her hand. "Then we figure out what comes next." The gallery was packed. Sophia stood near the entrance, watching people move through the space with the careful attention that art openings required, the subtle positioning to see and be seen, the practiced conversations that balanced appreciation with networking, the complex social dance of the art world. "Breathe," Ethan murmured beside her. He'd introduced her to what felt like 100 people already, critics, collectors, other artists, journalists. Her cheeks hurt from smiling, but the response to her work was overwhelmingly positive. "The Times critic spent 20 minutes in front of midnight in Mother's kitchen," he added. "That's a good sign." Sophia watched the woman in question, a severe-looking person with silver hair and impeccable clothing, taking notes as she studied the painting. "She looks like she's analyzing a crime scene. She's trying to understand how you created that sense of grief without relying on obvious symbols. It's technical appreciation." "Is that good or bad?" "With Margaret Chen, it's very good. She doesn't waste time on work that doesn't interest her." Across the room, Sophia spotted a familiar face, Helen Carrington from Meridian Arts, looking polished and predatory as she surveyed the crowd. Their eyes met briefly, and Helen's smile was sharp with recognition. "Your former nemesis is here," Ethan observed, following her gaze. "Should I be worried?" "You should be proud. Helen doesn't come to openings unless she thinks something important is happening." As if summoned by their conversation, Helen approached with the calculated grace of a practiced socialite. "Sophia, darling," she said, air-kissing in a way that managed to be both intimate and completely impersonal. "What a transformation! I hardly recognize these pieces from what you showed me before." "They're the same paintings," Sophia replied evenly. "Same style, same emotional content. The only thing that's changed is the context." Helen's laugh was musical and cutting. Context is everything in this business. Ethan certainly knows how to present work to its best advantage. There was something in her tone that made Sophia's stomach tighten, but before she could respond, a young couple approached, asking about purchasing Sunday Morning Loneliness. "Excuse me," Sophia said to Helen, turning to speak with the potential buyers. As she explained the story behind the painting, she felt Ethan's presence beside her, solid and reassuring. The evening continued with a steady stream of interest. 3 paintings sold within the first hour, including Drowning in Daylight, to a collector who said it reminded him of his own experience with depression, that it captured something he'd never seen represented in art before. "This is insane," Sophia whispered to Ethan during a brief lull. "People are actually buying my work." "People are connecting with your work," he corrected. "The purchasing is just how they express that connection." By the time the official opening wound down, 7 of the 15 pieces had sold. Sophia felt simultaneously exhausted and exhilarated, like she'd run a marathon and won an unexpected prize. "Congratulations!" Ethan said as the last stragglers filtered out. "You've officially arrived." They were alone in the gallery now, except for the catering staff cleaning up. Sophia walked through the space, looking at her work through the eyes of someone who'd just watched strangers respond to it with genuine emotion. "I can't believe this actually happened," she said. "I can." Ethan appeared beside her in front of Midnight in Mother's Kitchen. "I knew from the moment I saw your work that you had something special. Tonight just proved it to everyone else." Sophia turned to face him, suddenly aware that they were standing very close together in the dimmed gallery lighting. The careful professional distance they'd maintained throughout the evening was dissolving again, replaced by something more immediate and honest. "Ethan," she said, but he was already moving closer, his hand cupping her face with a gentleness that made her breath catch. "I've been wanting to do this all night," he said softly, and then he was kissing her. It was different from any kiss Sophia had ever experienced, slow and certain, as if they had all the time in the world. She could taste the champagne on his lips, could feel the careful control he'd maintained all evening, finally relaxing into something more genuine. When they finally broke apart, Sophia felt dizzy with more than just the kiss. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we stop pretending this is just professional," Ethan said, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "Now we see what happens when 2 people who are falling in love stop fighting it." "What about the gallery? What about trusting that some things are worth the complication?" Ethan's smile was soft and certain. "Sophia, you've spent your whole life painting truth. Maybe it's time to live it too." Sophia woke up in Ethan's bed, with sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the scent of coffee drifting from somewhere nearby. For a moment, she lay still, processing the night before, the successful opening, the kiss in the gallery, the conversation that had led them back to his apartment. "Good morning," Ethan said from the doorway, holding 2 mugs and wearing nothing but jeans and a satisfied smile. "I made coffee. Fair warning, it's not Giuseppe approved, but it's better than diner coffee." Sophia sat up, suddenly self-conscious in one of Ethan's shirts. "What time is it?" "Almost 10. I figured we both deserved to sleep in after last night." He handed her a mug and settled beside her on the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm in someone else's life," Sophia admitted. 24 hours ago, I was a struggling artist with a coffee shop addiction. Now I'm an exhibited artist who just spent the night with her gallerist. It's a lot of change." "Do you regret it?" Sophia looked at him, hair mussed from sleep, eyes serious despite his casual tone, completely focused on her answer. The previous night felt like a dream, but sitting here with him felt real in a way that made her chest tight with possibility. "No," she said finally, terrified but not regretful. "Good, because I've been thinking and I have a proposition for you." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" "The Times review comes out tomorrow. Based on Margaret Chen's reaction last night, I think it's going to be positive. That means you're going to get attention other galleries, collectors, possibly museums." Ethan's expression grew serious. "You're going to have choices to make." "What kind of choices?" "Whether to stay with Cross Contemporary or move to a bigger gallery. Whether to focus on commercial work or push your artistic boundaries. Whether to keep your current style or evolve based on market response." Ethan paused. "Whether to trust me with both your career and your heart." The question hung between them like a challenge. Sophia understood what he was really asking, not just about their personal relationship, but about the complicated intersection of love and business, art and commerce, trust and ambition. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we figure it out together. that we be honest about what this relationship means for both of us personally and professionally, that we set boundaries and respect them, but that we don't let fear keep us from something that could be extraordinary. Sophia set down her coffee and turned to face him fully. Ethan, I care about you, more than I expected to, more than is probably smart. But I also care about my art, about my career, about not becoming someone who got where she is because of who she's sleeping with. I would never. I know you wouldn't intentionally, but people talk. The art world is small and gossip travels fast. Helen Carrington was already making insinuations last night. Ethan's jaw tightened. Helen Carrington is bitter because she passed on your work, and I didn't. Don't let her insecurity become your limitation. It's not about her specifically. It's about maintaining my integrity, my independence. I need to know that my success is based on my talent, not my personal relationships. So what do you want to do? Sophia considered the question, thinking about everything that had led her to this moment, years of struggle, rejection, persistence, and finally, recognition. She thought about Ethan's genuine respect for her work, about the way he'd believed in her talent before he'd fallen for her as a person. I want to try, she said finally, but with conditions. Name them. First, we keep our personal and professional relationships as separate as possible. In the gallery, you're my gallerist. At home, you're whatever this becomes. Second, if this exhibition leads to other opportunities, I want your honest professional advice about what's best for my career, even if it means leaving cross-contemporary. Third, if either of us feels like the relationship is compromising our professional judgment, we address it immediately. Ethan listened carefully, his expression thoughtful. Those are reasonable conditions. I have one addition. Which is? We check in with each other regularly, not just about business, but about how we're feeling, what we need, whether this is working for both of us. Communication, not assumptions. Agreed. Sophia extended her hand with mock formality. Partners. Partners, Ethan confirmed, shaking her hand before pulling her closer. In everything. The Times Review was a love letter. Margaret Chen called Sophia's work emotionally fearless and a rare example of contemporary painting that prioritizes authentic human experience over market trends. She specifically praised Midnight in Mother's Kitchen as a masterpiece of grief rendered in color and texture that speaks to universal experiences of loss and healing. The review changed everything overnight. Sophia's phone rang constantly with interview requests, gallery inquiries, and collector interest. 3 more paintings sold within a week, and Cross Contemporary's website crashed from traffic trying to view her portfolio. This is insane, Sophia said, scrolling through emails on her laptop while sitting in Ethan's office. The Whitney wants to discuss including me in their emerging artist group show. The Guggenheim's contemporary curator wants to meet. Someone from Art Forum wants to do a profile. This is what success looks like, Ethan replied, but his tone was careful. The question is what you want to do with it. Over the past month, they'd settled into a rhythm that mostly worked. Professional during gallery hours, personal in the evenings and weekends. The boundaries weren't perfect. It was hard not to notice the way Ethan's eyes lingered on her when she came in to discuss business, or the way her pulse quickened when he spoke about her work with obvious pride. But they managed to maintain enough separation to feel authentic in both roles. What do you think I should do? Sophia asked. Professionally, I think you should take the Whitney meeting. It's a prestigious opportunity that could lead to museum shows. The Guggenheim meeting is worth having just to build the relationship. The Art Forum profile could introduce your work to collectors and critics internationally. And personally? Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her face. Personally, I think you should be careful not to let success change what makes your work special. You paint from an honest place. Don't let the art world convince you to paint for the market. Is that what you're worried about? That I'll go commercial? I'm worried that you'll start second-guessing yourself, that you'll begin to paint what you think people want instead of what you need to say. Ethan's expression was serious. I've seen it happen to talented artists. Success can be as dangerous as failure. That evening, they were having dinner at a small Italian restaurant when Sophia's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the Times Review. always knew you had potential. Drink soon, David. Sophia stared at the message, her appetite disappearing. Who's David? Ethan asked, reading her expression. My ex-boyfriend. We broke up 2 years ago. Sophia set down her phone. He's a photographer, fairly successful, well-connected in the art world. When we were together, he was always critical of my work, said it was too emotional, too unrefined. He encouraged me to develop a more commercial sensibility. And now he wants to reconnect. Now that I have a successful show and positive press, apparently. Sophia felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the same feeling she'd had during their relationship, when David's criticism had made her question every artistic choice. Are you going to respond? I don't know. Part of me wants to ignore him completely, but part of me is curious about what he wants to say. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. Whatever you decide, remember that his opinion of your work 2 years ago says more about him than it does about you. You haven't changed as an artist. You've just found an audience that understands what you're doing. That night, Sophia dreamed about painting. In the dream, she was in a vast white room filled with canvases, but every time she started to paint, voices interrupted her. Critics, collectors, David, even Helen Carrington, all telling her what colors to use, what emotions to express, what would sell best. She woke up feeling unsettled and creatively blocked for the first time in months. Bad dream? Ethan asked, finding her in his kitchen at 6 a.m., staring out the window with a cup of coffee. Anxiety dream about losing my artistic voice in all the noise? Sophia leaned against the counter. Is it normal to feel this way after success? It's normal to feel overwhelmed when your life changes quickly. The question is whether you trust yourself enough to stay centered in the chaos. How do I do that? You keep painting. You keep telling the truth. You keep remembering why you started doing this in the first place. Ethan moved to stand beside her. And you don't let other people's agendas become your artistic direction. Even yours. Especially mine. I'm your gallerist and your partner, but I'm not your artistic conscience. That has to come from you. Later that morning, Sophia responded to David's text with a polite but firm message. Thank you for reaching out. I'm focused on my current work and not available for drinks. Best wishes. Then she went home and painted for 6 hours straight, a piece she titled Finding Center, filled with bold strokes and vibrant colors that felt like reclaiming her own voice. 3 months after her successful opening, Sophia faced her first real test of balancing success with authenticity. The Meridian Arts Gallery, Helen Carrington's domain, extended an unexpected invitation. A group show featuring rising stars of contemporary art that would tour internationally and be featured in a major art book. It's a significant opportunity, Ethan said when Sophia brought him the proposal. They were in his office reviewing the terms, maintaining their professional dynamic despite the undercurrent of personal tension that always existed between them. But Sophia could hear the hesitation in his voice. But it comes with strings. Helen wants you to create new work specifically for the showpieces that fit her vision of contemporary accessibility. She's also requesting final approval over which pieces you submit. Sophia read through the contract carefully. Between the lines, she could see Helen's attempt to control and commercialize her work, to turn her raw emotional honesty into something more palatable for international collectors. She's basically asking me to become a different artist, Sophia said. That's my reading of it too. The question is whether the opportunity is worth the artistic compromise. That evening, Sophia and Ethan walked through the city, discussing the decision. They'd developed a tradition of taking long walks when facing difficult choices, the movement helping them think more clearly than sitting in offices or apartments. The practical part of me says I should take it, Sophia said, as they wandered through a neighborhood gallery district. It's international exposure, major collectors, career advancement. Every artist I know would kill for this opportunity. And the artist part of you? The artist part of me is screaming that it's a trap, that Helen wants to sand down all the edges that make my work distinctive. Sophia stopped walking. But what if I'm being naive? What if this is how the art world actually works and I need to play the game to build a sustainable career? Or what if your refusal to play the game is exactly what makes your work valuable? They ended up at Giuseppe's coffee shop, which stayed open late specifically for artists and writers who needed a place to think. The old man greeted them with his usual combination of warmth and judgment. "You two look troubled," he observed, preparing their usual drinks without being asked. "Artistic problems or personal problems?" "Both," Sophia admitted. "Success is more complicated than I expected." "Success," Giuseppe repeated, with the tone of someone who'd heard this complaint many times. "Everyone thinks success means getting what you want. Real success is wanting what you have." "But what if what you have isn't enough? What if you need to compromise to grow?" Giuseppe set down their coffee with the reverence of a priest handling sacred objects. "You want to know about compromise? I could make more money serving Starbucks coffee in paper cups. I could play music, serve pastries, become like every other coffee shop. But then I would not be Giuseppe's anymore. I would be someone else's idea of what a coffee shop should be." He gestured around his small, stubbornly old-fashioned space. "This place makes less money, attracts fewer customers, gets criticized by people who want convenience. But the people who come here, they understand what I am doing. They value it. That is my success." Sophia stared at him, feeling something click into place. "You're saying I should turn down the offer?" "I'm saying you should ask yourself, who do you want to be? The artist who paints truth or the artist who paints what sells? Both are choices. Both have consequences." That night, Sophia called Helen Carrington. "I'm flattered by the offer," she said, "but I'm going to decline. I don't think my work is a good fit for the vision you've described." There was a long pause before Helen responded, her voice cool. "This is a mistake, Sophia. Opportunities like this don't come around often, especially for artists without established track records." "I understand that, but I'd rather build my career on work I believe in than opportunities that require me to become someone else." "You're being naive. The art world doesn't reward stubbornness." "Maybe not, but it also doesn't reward authenticity with compromise. Thank you for thinking of me, but my answer is no." After she hung up, Sophia felt a mixture of relief and terror. Had she just made a principled stand or a career-limiting mistake? Only time would tell. 2 weeks after declining Helen's offer, Sophia received an unexpected call from Dr. Sarah Martinez, the chief curator at the Contemporary Museum of Art. "I've been following your work since the Times Review," Dr. Martinez said. "I'm particularly interested in your approach to emotional narrative in abstract composition. Would you be interested in discussing a solo exhibition for our Emerging Artists series?" Sophia nearly dropped the phone. The Contemporary Museum's Emerging Artists series was legendary. Past participants had gone on to major international careers, and the museum's support often led to representation by top galleries and inclusion in important collections. "I would be very interested," Sophia managed. "Excellent. I should mention that we've heard about your recent decision regarding the Meridian touring show. Between you and me, that kind of artistic integrity is exactly what we're looking for. We want artists who have something to say, not artists who say what they think people want to hear." The meeting with Dr. Martinez exceeded Sophia's wildest expectations. The museum wanted to give her complete creative control over a 20-piece exhibition with the budget to create new work specifically for the show. They were interested in her emotional narratives, her technical approach, her willingness to tackle difficult subjects. "We're particularly drawn to your series on loss and healing," Dr. Martinez explained as they walked through the museum's exhibition spaces. "There's a depth there that we rarely see in contemporary work. We'd like you to expand on those themes. Perhaps create a cohesive body of work that explores the full spectrum of human emotional experience." "When would this exhibition take place?" Sophia asked. "Next fall. That gives you almost a year to develop new pieces while continuing to show your existing work elsewhere." Walking out of the museum, Sophia felt like she was floating. This was exactly the kind of opportunity she'd dreamed of, prestigious but not commercial, challenging but not compromising, focused on artistic growth rather than market appeal. She found Ethan waiting for her at a nearby cafe, his expression carefully neutral in the way that meant he was trying not to influence her reaction. "How did it go?" he asked. "They offered me a solo show, 20 pieces, complete creative control, a year to prepare." Sophia sat down across from him, still processing the reality of it. It's everything I wanted. That's incredible. Congratulations. Ethan's smile was genuine, but tinged with something else, pride mixed with concern. What did you tell them? I said I needed to discuss it with my gallerist and give them an answer by the end of the week. They sat in silence for a moment, both understanding the implications. A museum solo show would elevate Sophia's career beyond what cross-contemporary could offer. It might mean moving to a larger gallery, working with international dealers, entering a completely different level of the art world. What do you think I should do? Sophia asked. I think you should say yes, Ethan said without hesitation. This is the kind of opportunity that transforms careers. You'd be crazy to turn it down. Even if it means leaving cross-contemporary? Even if it means leaving cross-contemporary. Ethan's voice was steady, but Sophia could see the cost of those words in his expression. My job as your gallerist is to help advance your career, even if that means you outgrow me. My job as someone who loves you is to support your dreams, even if they take you away from me. It doesn't have to take me away from you. We could figure out how to make it work. Sophia, be realistic. If you take this opportunity, you'll need representation that can handle international sales, museum relations, major collectors. You'll need someone with connections I don't have yet. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. I'm not going anywhere personally, but professionally, you might need to move on. And that's okay. The honesty in his voice broke something open in Sophia's chest. Here was a man willing to put her career ahead of his own interests, her success ahead of their business relationship. It was exactly the kind of integrity she'd hoped for, but rarely seen in the art world. I love you, she said suddenly, the words spilling out before she could stop them. Ethan's smile transformed his entire face. I love you too, which is why we're going to figure out how to make this work, whatever it looks like. That night, they made love with an intensity that felt like both celebration and goodbye, not to their relationship, but to the simplicity they'd known before success complicated everything. Sophia accepted the museum exhibition and, with Ethan's guidance, signed with Brennan International Gallery, a prestigious firm that specialized in museum-quality contemporary art. The transition was bittersweet but necessary, and Ethan handled it with the professionalism that had first attracted her to him. You're still my artist, he told her on her last day at Cross Contemporary. You just need representation that can take you where you're going. And where am I going? Wherever your work takes you, which, knowing you, will be somewhere authentic and probably surprising. The year of preparation for the museum show was the most productive of Sophia's life. She created 15 new pieces that explored what Dr. Martinez called the emotional archaeology of human experience, paintings that dug deep into themes of loss, love, transformation, and resilience. Working with Brennan International introduced her to a new level of the art world. Her pieces were now selling for amounts that would have seemed impossible just 2 years earlier. Art magazines featured her work, museums inquired about acquisitions, and collectors competed for pieces from her emerging catalogue. But the most important change was personal. Success hadn't corrupted her artistic vision, it had clarified it. Free from financial worry and external pressure, Sophia found herself painting with even more emotional honesty than before. You've evolved, Ethan observed during one of their regular dinners together. Their romantic relationship had deepened as their professional relationship ended, built now on choice rather than circumstance. How so? Your new work, it's still emotionally authentic, but there's a confidence there that wasn't there before. You're not painting from a place of desperation anymore. You're painting from a place of strength. Sophia considered this as she looked around the restaurant, a small, intimate place that had become their regular spot. I think I used to paint because I needed to survive. Now I paint because I have something to say. That's the difference between emerging and emerged. You found your voice. The museum exhibition, titled Emotional Archaeology, The Paintings of Sophia Reeves, opened to critical acclaim and record attendance. The New York Times called it a revelatory exploration of human feeling rendered in color and form. Art Forum praised her technical mastery and service of emotional truth. 3 pieces were acquired by major museums on opening night. But the moment that meant the most to Sophia came during the opening reception, when she overheard two strangers discussing midnight in Mother's kitchen. "It's exactly how grief feels," one woman said to her companion. "Like you're drowning in familiar spaces, like even home becomes foreign. I've never seen that captured so perfectly." This was why Sophia painted not for critics or collectors or career advancement, but for moments of recognition when her truth connected with someone else's experience. 2 years after her museum exhibition, Sophia stood in a new space, her own studio in the Arts District, a converted warehouse with soaring ceilings and northern light that made colors sing. She was preparing for her second museum show, this one at the Whitney, while also working on pieces for a traveling exhibition that would take her work to galleries across Europe. Success had brought opportunities she'd never imagined, but it had also brought her back to what mattered most: the relationship between artist and canvas, the daily practice of translating emotion into visual form, the quiet satisfaction of work that felt honest and necessary. "How's the new piece coming?" Ethan asked, finding her in the studio late one evening. He'd started his own art consultancy, helping collectors build meaningful collections rather than just profitable investments. Their professional separation had strengthened both their careers and their relationship. "It's fighting me," Sophia said, stepping back from a canvas covered in layers of green and gold. "I'm trying to capture the feeling of growth, not just personal growth, but the way love grows between people. It's more complex than I expected." Ethan studied the painting, his expression thoughtful. What if it's not about capturing the feeling? What if it's about creating a space where the feeling can exist? "Meaning? Your best work doesn't just represent emotions, it evokes them. Maybe this piece needs to be less about showing growth and more about making the viewer feel what growth is like." Sophia looked at the canvas with new eyes, seeing it not as a representation, but as an invitation. "You're right. I've been trying to paint growth instead of painting the experience of growing." She picked up her brush and began to work, adding sweeping strokes that suggested movement, change, expansion. As she painted, she thought about her own growth from invisible coffee shop dweller to exhibited artist, from someone who painted from desperation to someone who painted from choice, from a woman afraid of love to someone brave enough to build a life with another person. "Better?" Ethan asked after she'd worked for another hour. "Better, more honest." Sophia set down her brush and turned to face him. "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "Giuseppe's coffee shop. How he never compromised his vision, even when it would have been easier or more profitable. How he built something authentic and trusted that the right people would find it." "What about it?" "I think that's what we've done too, both of us. We didn't compromise our values for success. We found success by staying true to our values." Ethan moved closer, slipping his arms around her waist. "Is this leading somewhere specific?" "It's leading to this." Sophia pulled a small box from her paint-stained apron pocket. "I know it's traditional for the man to propose, but I'm not particularly traditional, and I know what I want." Ethan stared at the box, then at her face, his expression shifting from surprise to understanding to joy. "Sophia, I want to marry you. I want to build a life together that's as honest and authentic as our work. I want to grow old with someone who encourages me to be the best version of myself without trying to change who I am." She opened the box to reveal a simple gold band. "What do you say?" Ethan's answer was a kiss that tasted like coffee and possibility, like late nights in the studio and early mornings in Giuseppe's cafe, like all the beautiful complications of building something real with another person. "Yes," he said against her lips, "always yes." The wedding took place in Giuseppe's coffee shop, which the old man closed for the afternoon so they could celebrate properly. It was a small ceremony: family, close friends, a few fellow artists, and Dr. Martinez from the museum, who had become both a professional mentor and personal friend. "You clean up nice," Giuseppe told Sophia as she stood in her simple white dress, surrounded by the familiar smell of espresso and the sound of people who mattered laughing together. "Thanks to you," Sophia replied. "This place is where everything started, where Ethan first saw my work, where we had our first real conversation about art and compromise. It felt right to get married here." "Art brings people together," Giuseppe said with the satisfaction of someone whose philosophy had been proven correct. Good art, anyway. The fake stuff just brings fake people together. The ceremony was officiated by Dr. Martinez, who spoke about the intersection of art and love, about the courage required to be authentic in both creative work and personal relationships. When Sophia and Ethan exchanged vows, they promised not just to love each other, but to support each other's artistic growth, to remain honest about their needs and dreams, and to build something together that was greater than either could create alone. I promise to see you clearly, Sophia said, looking into Ethan's eyes, and to trust you to see me clearly in return. I promise to grow with you without losing myself, and to love you without trying to change you. I promise to champion your dreams even when they scare me, Ethan replied, and to trust our love enough to be honest about what I need. I promise to be your partner in everything: business and pleasure, success and failure, ordinary days and extraordinary ones. The reception continued late into the evening, with toasts that ranged from heartfelt to hilarious, and dancing to music that Giuseppe claimed was too loud but acceptable for special occasions. As the night wound down and guests began to leave, Sophia found herself standing with Ethan in front of Midnight in Mother's Kitchen, which Giuseppe had insisted on hanging in the coffee shop after purchasing it from Cross Contemporary. "How does it feel?" Ethan asked, "being married to your former gallerist?" "Complicated, terrifying, perfect," Sophia replied without hesitation. "How does it feel being married to an artist who once threatened to quit rather than compromise her work?" "Like I married exactly the right person for exactly the right reasons." They stood together in comfortable silence, looking at the painting that had been the beginning of everything. The piece that had led to late-night conversations about art and authenticity, to a relationship built on mutual respect and shared values, to a love story that had somehow managed to strengthen both their careers and their hearts. "What's next?" Sophia asked. "Whatever we want," Ethan said, echoing their conversation from years earlier. "The world is full of possibilities when you're not afraid to be yourself." Sophia smiled, thinking about the studio waiting for her tomorrow, about the half-finished paintings that needed her attention, about the new work she wanted to create as a married woman, an established artist, a person who had found her place in the world without compromising her soul. "I love you," she said, the words carrying the weight of everything they'd built together. "I love you too," Ethan replied, "forever and always, exactly as you are." And in Giuseppe's coffee shop, surrounded by the smell of espresso and the memory of late-night conversations about art and dreams, Sophia Reeves Cross felt exactly where she belonged, visible, valued, and utterly completely herself. The gallery was packed for the opening of Visible, a retrospective of Sophia Reeves Cross. 5 years of marriage had brought new depths to her work paintings that explored not just individual emotion, but the complex dynamics of partnership, growth, and shared dreams. Sophia stood near the entrance, 8 months pregnant and glowing with the particular radiance that came from creating life both on canvas and within her own body. Ethan was beside her, one hand protectively on her back, as they watched people move through the exhibition that traced her artistic evolution from desperate honesty to confident truth-telling. "The early work still hits the hardest," observed Margaret Chen, the Times critic who had first championed Sophia's career. "But the new pieces show such sophistication, emotion refined by experience rather than raw need." "She's learned the difference between painting from pain and painting through pain," Ethan replied. "The emotion is still authentic, but it's no longer desperate." Across the room, Giuseppe held court near the coffee station, explaining to anyone who would listen how he had discovered Sophia years ago in his cafe. Dr. Martinez was deep in conversation with potential museum acquisitions committee, and even Helen Carrington had appeared, her expression grudgingly respectful as she studied Sophia's latest work. "How do you feel?" Sarah Kim asked, appearing at Sophia's elbow. She had recently opened her own gallery and was featuring several of Sophia's protégés, young artists who had found their voices with Sophia's mentorship. "Grateful," Sophia said simply, "for all of it, the struggles that taught me what mattered, the success that gave me freedom to explore, the love that showed me I didn't have to choose between authenticity and happiness." The centerpiece of the exhibition was a new painting titled Becoming Visible, a swirling composition of gold and blue that seemed to shimmer with internal light. It had taken Sophia 3 months to complete, working through her changing relationship with visibility itself. "It's not about being seen by others anymore," she had explained to the exhibition catalogue writer. "It's about seeing yourself clearly enough to show up authentically in the world. That's what true visibility is, not external recognition, but internal recognition that allows you to be fully present in your own life." As the evening wound down and guests began to filter out, Sophia found herself standing in front of that centerpiece painting with Ethan. "Any regrets?" he asked, a question that had become their tradition at major milestones. "None," Sophia said, feeling the baby kick as if in agreement. "What about you?" "Only that it took us so long to find each other." "Maybe we needed to become the people we are before we could build what we have," Sophia suggested. "Maybe the timing was exactly right." They were interrupted by Giuseppe, who approached with a small, wrapped package. "For the baby," he said gruffly. "Something to remember the place where her parents' love story began." Inside the package was a tiny espresso cup, child-sized but perfectly proportioned, for when she's old enough to appreciate good coffee, Giuseppe explained, and to remember that the best things in life are worth waiting for. As they drove home through the city where they had first met, first fallen in love, first learned to build something lasting together, Sophia felt the deep satisfaction that came from a life lived authentically. She was no longer the invisible girl cleaning offices and dreaming of recognition. She was no longer the desperate artist painting from need rather than choice. She was Sophia Reeves' crosswife, artist, teacher, soon-to-be mother, a woman who had learned that true visibility came not from external validation, but from the courage to be honestly, completely yourself. "I can't wait to meet her," Sophia said, rubbing her belly as they pulled into their driveway. "She's going to be extraordinary," Ethan said with certainty. "Look at her parents, an artist who paints truth and a gallerist who champions authenticity. She'll grow up knowing that being yourself is the only success that matters." That night, as Sophia lay in bed feeling the baby move and listening to Ethan's steady breathing beside her, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From invisible to visible, from struggling to thriving, from alone to deeply connected. Each step had been necessary. Each challenge had taught her something essential about what it meant to live authentically in a world that often rewarded compromise over truth. Tomorrow she would return to her studio, to the half-finished paintings that were calling her name, to the daily practice of translating emotion into visual form. But tonight, she was simply grateful for the love that had found her when she wasn't looking for it, for the success that had come without requiring her to sacrifice her soul, for the life she had built by staying true to herself even when it would have been easier to be someone else. In the darkness of their bedroom, Sophia smiled and closed her eyes, already dreaming of the stories she would tell their daughter about courage, authenticity, and the beautiful complexity of building a life that felt true from the inside out.